Okay, welcome to Torah of the Earth, and this session is particularly about the Torah of rocks and the Torah of the Earth, quite literally, and it's part of the Pearl Sun Center online offerings at this time. And I would, if you go to pearlsuncenter.org/online, you can see the rest of what we'll be offering, and we'll keep trying to put up more online classes. And we have a Shavuot gathering and a whole bunch of other programs, so please check them out. And with that, I'm going to start the session. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back and forth between some sort of free-flowing, meandering Torah and the sources. So if you look in the chat, you can find the Psachyah source sheet, and it has sources, and we'll definitely not use all of them, and they're not even exhaustive about the amount of sources there are on rocks in the Torah, but it's just a beginning, and everything we're going to say here is also just a beginning of a look at the depth of rocks in the Torah. So first, does everyone have the source sheet? Can you see it? And if this is a recorded video, I will try to have the link for the source sheet up next to it. So if you can type into the chat that you can see the source sheet. Just want to make sure. Yes, okay, great. If you have questions, or if some deep insight comes to you while we're learning, please put it into the chat, like some affinity or a connection between something that we're talking about and something that is of interest. Put that in there. It'll be good for me, and it'll be good for everyone to see it, so please contribute. And if there's, and I'll try to respond to it as well. Okay, so here we go. So the first, I'll start with the first verse. We're not going to be going through this in a bunch of verses, but I'll be referring to them by number. So there's dozens and dozens of references in the Torah to rocks, and dozens of there's tremendous amounts, but there's also dozens of references to particularly the Creator as my rock, right? My rock and my Redeemer. So for instance, like just the first verse on that I'm quoting here, it says, Vayomer er chamacha Hashem chizki. I gotta turn this off. So I adore you, Hashem, chizki, my strength. Hashem Sa'ali Hashem is my, and it translates here as crag, which is like a craggy rock, like a craggy cliff rock, which is also similar to the type of thing that is described as the Creator sort of hiding behind, right? This craggy rock on the top of Har Sinai. And also, it's like the word that David HaMelech, King David, uses a lot, which is Selah, like rock. So when he does that, it's another reference to the rock. So here, Umutsudati, and my fortress. Fortress is like Mitsuda, is also like this stack of rocks, and it's the symbol of strength, stacked rocks. Here and also in Israel, when you and in a lot of ancient places, you see the concept of a stacked rock is a marker, and this has been made, and also a symbol of strength. You see them? It's like these giant rocks that have been moved and stacked intentionally. So then it continues on, my rescuer, my God. The rock that I seek refuge, my shield, my champion. It keeps going. So the rock as a place of refuge is particularly the symbol and is the visual that is used over and over and over again in the Torah. And when the Creator is being referred to as my rock, like many times in Tehillim, it's this aspect of my rock, meaning the thing that I hold on to during the flood. So while the challenges and the onsets of the turmoil of life hits me, the Creator is my rock in the sense that that is my security and my refuge and my redemption through that struggle. And that is in dozens and dozens of places where the rock itself is being referred to. That, and in what sense is the Creator my rock? In what sense is the Creator my refuge? Is that the Creator creates refuge and creates during the turmoil. Not that the Creator is the rock, but is the refuge and is the thing that creates the rock, meaning the refuge during the storm. But it's in a very literal way also. So then we're gonna get into that. I also want to quote from Shir Shirim, which we quoted last time, which is, "Let me be a seal upon your heart, like the seal upon your hand. For love is fierce as death, and passion is mighty as Sheol. Its darts are darts of fire, a blazing flame. And vast floods and many waters cannot quench this love, nor rivers can drown it." So that is a part of the Song of Songs, which Rabbi Akiva referred to as the Holy of Holies, right? So there's the Torah in a general sense is understood as holy, but the Shir Shirim, which is the Song of Songs, which is the sort of mystical, erotic love poetry book of the Torah, that's called the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies. Not just because it itself is, and that's what Rabbi Akiva referred to it, not only because it itself is holy, but because the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies, is an intimate place in the Mishkan, and hopefully we'll be able to go into that and delve into that, what that means. But on the simple level, there's three levels to the concept of holiness being demarcated in a physical place in the Torah, which is the courtyard, the holy, and the Holy of Holies. It's these three things. The courtyard is the outside where the altar is, and that's where it's like a barbecue and a slaughter fest. The Kodesh is the way of looking at the world as like a table, as like a home. So there's a table, there's a lamp, there's bread. That's looking at the world not as like a giant struggle and a fight, but looking at it as a place where everything is eating, where everything is being fed, where everything is being sustained. And then the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies, the more inner sanctum of way of looking at the world, is that it's just like a bedroom. It is like the deepest love that is going on in this world. It's just love moving through everything. It's just waves of love moving through everything. And these are like more and more intimate ways of looking at the world. And so Shir Shirim, which has always been the focus of many mystical Jewish essays and Torah, is particularly going over Shir Shirim. There's a minhag of reading Shir Shirim on every Friday, and it's quoted over and over and over again. And this particular line is actually used a lot too. So you have, I'm just going to read it again. Let me be a seal upon your heart, like the seal upon your hand. For love is fierce as death, and passion is as mighty as Sheol. Its darts are darts of fire, a blazing flame. And many waters cannot quench this love, nor rivers drown it. And what this is referring to when you're reading it as a mystic encounter with the source of your being, it's the love between the known and the unknown, between you and your source of being. And no matter what is happening, nothing can quench the love of the fact that anything is happening, that there's anything happening at all, and that we're in a relation to that which is beyond us. So everything that is happening is a way of experiencing and encountering that source, that there's nothing that happens after that that would that outweighs that, nothing that overwhelms that love of the fact that anything is happening. So if anything comes up for anyone, please feel free to text. So when we look at the idea of a rock, the rock is the hard substance in this world, right? So if water, and this series of classes is the Torah of Earth, and we're going to be going through the Torah of Earth, the Torah of Water, the Torah of Fire, and the Torah of Air in each session. And maybe we'll be doing a second session for each one of them, because the Torah of Rocks is just too much. And I apologize for the dogs barking. It's just, they also, this is my version of barking, and I'm just gonna live with it because it's beautiful. So of each one of these elements, the rock is the most solid, right? So if we think of non-being as the source of being, so nothing needs to be happening, but amazingly something is happening, and each and every one of us can agree that something is happening. And even if we think it's an illusion is happening, and the illusion is that there's a material existence and it's hardened. So the most material expression of the physical world, and the hardest one, is the most obvious metaphor, but not just in a metaphor in your mind, but it's a physical thing to hold, is the rock. That's the most solid and defined. And so that is also the most solid of coming into being. And the most fluid is the water. So the water is in Torah this aspect of before creation, when creation just started. And I'll jump to the number 6, creation. Number 7 of the sources is as when God began to create heaven and earth, the earth being unformed and void, which is in Hebrew tohu vivohu, with darkness over the face of the deep, and the wind, the breath of God, hovering over the face of the waters. So I'll read in Hebrew: Bereshis bara Elohim es hashamayim v'es haaretz, v'aretz haisa taihu v'vayhu, v'chayshech al panei saham, v'ruach Elohim merachefetz al panei hamayim. Oh, look at that. There's the stack. Thank you. I love how that happened. So the before creation, i.e. the potential before anything is actually being and before anything actually is, you have this amorphous tohu vavohu, and it's understood and described as cold, dark, and wet. It is watery, not in the sense of water that we know that pours down a river, but it has the same attributes. It has the same feel to it. It moves, it can't be condensed, it can't be hardened, it's fluid, and who knows what it is, right? So you have this cold, dark, and wet tohu vavohu. And then you have this breath of the Creator that is blowing on the waters. And the blowing on the waters is the Creator bringing this tohu vavohu, this potential, into being. That, like the Shlomo ibn Gabriel, the one who wrote many of piyutim and songs in Jewish liturgy, especially like Adon Olam, which everyone sings in the beginning of davening, but also for Sephardim and for any Jew, there's piyutim. There's a song for each one of for Pesach and Shavuot and Sukkot, and he's also one of the greatest Jewish poets. So, anyways, he described this tohu vavohu as the desire to be, the Creator's desire to be, and the Creator's desire to be is what the entire being is made out of. And so this potential and chaotic void before creation is what all of creation is sitting on, and everything that happens to come into being, and everything that is, which is the sun and the moon and the stars and the birds and the fish and each one of us and the trees and every little thing that comes out in history is just the movement of that desire to be hardening and becoming substantial and being. And that everything that is and that has being has a desire to turn back to its source and return. So everything that is in the potential, in the tohu, is desiring to come into being, and it comes into being. And then once it's in being, it goes and returns back to its source. It has this desire to return back to its source. And that yearning is, as we exist, our desire to know our source and to know where we're coming from and why any of this is happening. That is that teshuvah, that return back to that source. But everything that is young and everything that is amorphous desires to be and to become, and desires to become substantial and to have a point and to move forward into life and to exist and have a story. But once you exist and you have a story and you are in that existence, you desire to return back to your source, and that is in the sense that everything returns back to the sea, everything goes back to decay. But also everyone wants to, the beginning part of your life is to figure out who you are, and the next part is to be able to let go of that a bit, right, and give back. So the spirit of the Creator was hovering over the waters. That is the sense of blowing the water. Let's read Rashi on that. So Rashi says, and I'm going to read the English. The Spirit of God was hovering, meaning the breath of God, or the voice of the Creator, was pushing against these chaotic waters, that the throne of the divine glory was standing in space, hovering over the face of the waters by the breath of the mouth of the Holy One, blessed be He, and by His command, even as a dove hovers over its nest. And so if you look at the Torah, you can see sort of like a mountain of stories. The final stories sort of about the kingdom of Judea and about King David and about the Jewish tribe, the Yehudi tribe of Yehudim. That final thing that is sitting on the bottom, that's like as it plays out. Like that's a very particular story. But each one of these stories keep going back to a more meta, not Yehuda, but when Yehuda was just one person and he was a brother amongst 12 tribes. And not just when he was Yaakov, but also Yitzhak and Abraham, and where Abraham sat, and then everyone coming from Noah all the way back to Adam. And then the meta of all stories, the most meta story, which is the story of all life, is the story of Gan Eden. But even before that is this other image of this chaotic void, this flood, this marble of water, with this cloud of breath hovering over the waters. And that's maybe the most central image of the entire Torah, is this flood of water with this cloud wisping around, going like this and hovering, just like two doves. And these two doves are like the manifestation of the Creator's presence and desire to be in this world, trying to have some place to sit. That initial cloud is called the Shekhinah, which is the feminine presence of the Creator, and it wants to have a place to sit, just like a dove that is surrounded by a bunch of waters and wants to have a place to sit by the coast. And it finds a craggy rock to hang on to against the water to mate and to make its little nest and continue the cycle of love that these two doves have. And that image of these two doves trying to find a place to be in love and to have a rock and a refuge for that home against this sort of circle of water is like the most visual in all the Torah. And it starts off here, which is this chaotic void of which the Creator is whispering words, whispering letters to split this chaotic void, to split this potential of what could be, to create something that is, so that love can find a place to rest on it. And that's the sort of reason for creation. There's many times where the Torah is describing that exact image. So you'll have this exact image here in the beginning of Bereshis. You'll have that same image in the temple where you have the two cheruvim, which are two little doves that are like as if they're, it says that there were male and female and they were kissing when there was love in the community of the tribe. When and love in the world, then these two doves these two cheruvim would be mating. This is in the Holy of Holies, like the central holiest place in the world for Jewish people. And then when there was hatred or division, then they would turn and they would split away from each other. But the optimal face is like that. And in between these two cheruvim hovered the Shekhinah, which is the cloud. And you could hear the Creator speaking from within the love between these two cheruvim. And that's the same image as the Shekhinah hovering between these fluttering doves on a rock by the water. You have that same image in Noach, right? So the Creator decides, never mind, I'm finished with this world. It goes back to a flood, but then there's a rock appearing. The new world is coming into being, like a world within a world. This rock sitting on in the center of a flood, and you have the dove that finds a place to land. And you have that same image over and over and over again. And I don't know how much time we're going to have to get into it. I set this for an hour and a half, but this visual is the most meta visual of all. So if someone was contemplating, and again, I'll review the concept of Torah. So like we said, this whole existence doesn't have to be happening. It is happening. It's a communication from the unknown because it is legible to us. In other words, we can discern things from it. We figure things out. And since it's legible and concerned, it can be understood as a communication, and it's telling us something. And so Torah is this yearning to know why. Yearning to know, why am I here? Why are we here? What is it that you want? But the source of being and the thing behind all creation is completely absent. For Jewish people, it's a complete negative theology. There's nothing to say about it. It's never there. That's the whole point of it. So the only thing you can do is you can contemplate the creation, the thing that does exist, and hear what it's saying. So, and you can experience and encounter it through its words, and therefore you are with it. And that's the idea of the Shekhinah. So Torah is the idea of turning to and looking and reading the wisdom with which the world is created, and initially and probably most importantly, the natural world, both with its structure and the inception of the natural world and its like ideal forms, but also, and just as important, the way the world moves through and changes in history, and looking at that not as just describing it, but looking at it for guidance. And when you find guidance to it, knowing what to do and what we should do and what you can do as a person and who you are, when you get that guidance, that's understood as receiving Torah, getting Torah. And that's the broadest explanation of Torah. And then there's the particular manifestation of Torah. And that's, we talked about it in the other class, but just, so when one does that, it's like, what is going on here? Well, the most obvious and clear visual of all of life is that we're sitting on a giant rock in the middle of a lot of water. that's it could have been anything. We could have been sitting on something, we could have been, but this is actually, we're sitting on a big rock surrounded by a vast unknown sea of water, and even the universe can be understood as that. And there's clouds above us, and that's the most basic thing. And there you have that visual again. And this is not like from Torah, this is just from observing the natural world. You're sitting on a giant rock, there's water all around you, and there's clouds above you. And that's like the Shekhinah, the clouds, finding a resting place on the rock amidst the sort of the great sea. So one of the deepest parts of Torah is not to just say, but is to, what I mean by not by something somebody says, but by seeing the world and realizing that is what it is. That is our life. We are sitting on a giant rock amidst the sea. But to understand why is that? And thinking about it deeply. Like, what is it trying to tell me on the deepest sense? Contemplating it, not really in a rational sense, but just bringing your mind back to it again and again, because that's like hearing the words of the Creator. So if we're looking for practical meditation, that's something to bring your mind back to over and over again. And especially this scene of where on top of this rock, all this life flourishes. Yeah. The other thing that's interesting is that we know, we can hear in creation, is that what life emerging on this rock and the doves being able to land and love being able to be happening and find a place and a manifestation in this world happens through fire, right? So it's the splitting of the sea. It's dynamic. One of the more interesting aspects of the Jewish tradition is the Creator is constantly referred to as like the two major things the Creator did was make the world and split the sea, right? So when we're in the Seder, we say for Kiddush, we say the same thing. The Creator of the heavens and earth and took us out of Egypt. That seems like a very small thing, like took us out of, like, the major point in the Seder is trying to, one of the major points in the Seder is trying to show that the splitting of the sea was actually more miraculous than the beginning part. If you look at going out of Egypt, there's two things. One is the plagues that you get removed from slavery, and then you go through the sea. And when you go through the sea, then they're out, right? And that's the finality of that story of leaving Egypt. But the finality of it and the final moment, that's the most important, which is the splitting of the sea. In the splitting of the sea, you have the east wind, and the east wind is called the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Wind, the Holy Spirit. That's east wind is the hot, bright words of the Creator. It's the same wind, and if you look in the sources, it's the same wind that split the Tohu Vavohu, split the primordial sea to make the world. So you have V'ruach Elohim erachefes al pnei hamayim and Vayihi or. And then this whispering is like the communication, let there be light. The darkness now splits, light and darkness. And then let there be a sea and sky, split. Then let there be earth and vegetation, split. It's those three splits that allows for the dove to rest, to have a rock amidst the turmoil, to find manifestation, to find existence, to find being. So the creator is known in the Jewish tradition as the splitter, right? And all the way in the world that the creator is found can be found in those splits, can be found in that duality. So wherever you find a duality, if you can transcend that duality, it says like Avram Avinu, when how he discovered the creator and started this Jewish love affair with the thing that we can't encounter and touch. He saw the sun and he said, oh, the sun must be the ruler of this. But then it had a flaw and went down. Then the moon came up and he said, the moon must be the creator. And then he saw, oh, it was a duality. And the thing that, and each one of these, he, and then it describes more and more dualities. But in everything in creation that he thought might be the big thing of this world and the point of this world, he realized every single thing has a flaw and something else is making up for it. And that thing also has a flaw and something else is making up for that. And all of this whole experience that we have is constantly telling us that nothing is perfect and nothing stands alone, but everything needs the other. And if you contemplate that deep enough, then you unify these dualities, and you unify it through the one who split it, i.e. the creator is the one that made that cut. So the concept of potential coming into reality is exemplified by the rock. And does that make sense? So the sort of the fire. Okay, so I'm going to read from in the source sheet, it's number 5. It's from the Psachyah Yetzirah, which is the book of creation or the book of formation. So 22 foundation letters, 3 mothers, 7 devils, 12 elementals. It's talking about the concept that the entire world is a linguistic manifestation and can be understood because when you peer into what exists, you can decipher it, it's legible, you can get information out of it. When you get information out of it, it's like getting letters out of it. And those letters are like the letters of fire, they're like letters of information, they're letters. And in the fact that you can hear information, that means it's a communication. And therefore, beyond the world are these letters of fire that are bringing it into existence. And so you can hear those letters of fire in everything that exists. And the Psachyah Yetzirah is referring to that. And I don't want to get into all the details of the Psachyah Yetzirah, obviously here, but it's sort of outlining how creation happens. So there's these 3 mother letters, the Aleph, Mem, and Shin. The Mem is the water, and the Mem goes so the sound before all of creation was The next sound is Shin, which is the fire. So that's the Hebrew letter of Shin, and it goes that's the fire. So the fire starts cooking the water. And when the fire, it's not really water, it's like this. It contains everything in it. It is utterly void because it has no being to it. It's just pure potential, but it's like mud. And the fire is cooking it. And then the next letter is the Aleph. So all of creation comes out of these 3 mother letters, which is the next letter is the Aleph, which is the Ah. The Ah. And that is the result of the Shin. So if you have this watery amorphous thing, the Shin is this like hot fire, and the Aleph is the thing that is going between it. It is what is generated by the fire cooking the water. And so that wind blows and pushes away the chaotic sea to form and to bring out and to split the sea to have this rock, so that all of life can, of the life that we have, our life, and a place for the birds to land, can be happening on that spot. I just wanted to get to that that quote. That is from the Sefer Yetzirah, and in the Jewish tradition, the way it's understood is that this is articulated through generations. It's coming from the house of Rabbi Akiva, but it's Aleph is the element of air, and Shin is the element of fire, and Mem is the element of water. And the rock is sort of, it comes out of the water. And fire is not even, it's like almost not an element. That's a longer thing. It's pre-creation because it's the letters outside of creation. It's the information that makes it happen. I was responding to a question. So the rock as being, right, also is it is the symbol not just for the fact that life exists, but in a person's arc of their life, having who am I? What am I supposed to be doing here? What's my purpose? Is like the as the time is going on, the fire of life is cooking you. So you start off like kind of like amorphous with a tremendous amount of potential and directions that you could go. And then you get cooked into a much harder state, and that's what you are, right? And then you're like this little clay vessel, and you've brought just what you're supposed to bring. And then you start to get overcooked and brittle, and you start breaking apart, and then you go back to the water. That arc is the same arc that all of creation has. It's like this amorphous sea, the rock emerging, love finds its place to land on there for just a bit, to do its thing, and then it collapses back out. So these primary states of the water, the hardening, and the letting go, is like the three states that we talked about in the previous thing, which is Hachna'ah, Havdalah, and Hamtakah. And this is very old Kabbalah, but it's, oh yeah, well, Sarah said it's a burden. You need to have a yoke to carry it, but you can't do it on Shabbat. So Hachna'ah, Havdalah, and Hamtakah, because Shabbat transcends that. Hachna'ah, Havdalah, and Hamtakah is translated, I think one way we could translate is surrender, separation, and sweetening. So the arc of life, so it says, Neely says, I'm definitely feeling overcooked and brittle. Yeah, me too. That's just the way it works. When you were 8, you were a lot more flexible. Who knows where you, okay. So you have the surrender, the separation, and the sweetening. So the first state of life, and this exact description of this model, it's a Kabbalistic model, and it's coming from the Baal Shem Tov, but it's at its core, it's in the Torah. That is where it's coming from. It's just a Kabbalistic way of describing it. These threes. So the first stage is surrender. Is like it's happening, right? Like not even looking at what is happening, right? So how could one understand what the Creator is telling them if they don't want to look at life? And we were talking about the the idea of hitbodedut, of going out into nature and contemplating it as the primary source of going there, yearning with a prayer to know who am I and what should I be doing, and what should we all be doing in a greater sense, and then receiving Torah, which is the next stage, which is receiving the wisdom through that yearning to contemplate, to know. So if one won't hachna'ah, if one won't surrender and just see it the way it is, this is what's happening, this is happening, but constantly tries to fill it with like a fantasy of what they wish a creator would be doing, what they wish a world would be like, what I wish I was like, rather just look at it straight. This is what I am, and this is what's happening. And that's the first stage of surrender. The second stage is separation, separating those parts, which is also known as the place of avoda. But it's also the place of Torah, of receiving what is who you are and what is the job to do. That's the second stage. And the sweetening is that you can't do your whole job. You'll never be what you are. You're not going to be doing this for long, and just embrace the disillusion of that as well. You're coming here to do something. It's not a forever thing, and you'll be gently ushered back into your source. So that's like the sweetening. And in that source, you're unified with everything. So everything that you struggled against and everything you fought against and everything you thought was your opposite and everything you thought you weren't, that's last stage is like an embrace and a kiss of all of that. An embrace of a kiss of and that is those two doves, right? Fluttering over the rock, the love of these two opposites, finding a place to create, finding a place to love and to create and to make the world like a nest. In fact, it says that Mashiach refers to the highest level in Shemayim as the nest of Mashiach. It's like a little nest. It's the same concept like we talked about with Noah, with the visual of Noah, with finding the little bird on the top of this rock. And the same thing with Har Sinai. So you have the rock and you have the cloud hovering over the rock, and it's there that you received the Torah. And it's the same thing like we talked about with the Mishkan, where you have the courtyard, the Kodesh, and the Kodesh Kodashim. You have life's a big slaughter fest, and you're just struggling and struggling and struggling. That's like the outside of the temple. That's like the altar. That's where like it's a battle. And then you move into the second stage, which is like, oh, it's a home. Here's everything in its place. There's the dogs barking. There's Psachyah meandering. There's everyone's sitting here, and each one of these, everything has its compartment. It's not a wild, bloody thing like outside. There's bread on the table. There's an incense. There's lamp. Everything is set. Everything is order. Everything has its place. And then the last one, that's like the place of Torah. The last one, which is the sweetening, which is the which is the letting go, that's like the Kodesh Kodashim. That's where the Shekhinah is hovering. It's all, this whole thing, nothing's going wrong. There's not a giant disaster happening. It's not perfectly fitting. There's nothing to talk about. It's just love coursing back and forth, and embrace that. And that is like the next stage. We also have that same thing in like the concept of Gan Eden and home and the market. You have the same thing of yearning. Someone brings yearning, and then learning, and then returning. Each one of these stages, it keeps playing that out over and over again. And like we said before, that the world stands on three pillars, i.e. there's a flood around it with Mayim Rabim, of great waters, and the world is standing on these three pillars, which is Torah, Tefillah, and Gemilut Chasadim, which is the Tefillah, the yearning, the Torah, getting the path, and the Gemilut Chasadim is returning, giving back, and letting go of what you have and giving to the things around you. So the middle stage is that rock, which is the getting the definition. And we have this scheduled for an hour and a half. And we're about like halfway through. And what happens on the rock, i.e. the rock being the being, the purpose, the meaning, and it's being described as like mud and water being hardened into clay. I wanted to get that quote from Yirmiyahu that says, he said, I do not, can I not do with you, Israel, as the potter does, says Haviah, like clay in the hands of the potter, so are you in my hands, Israel, right? So that metaphor of the, we also have that on Yom Kippur, that metaphor of the creator as like the potter is the one who's also cooking. That's number 4 in Yirmiyahu in the source sheet. Thank you. That is the concept of uh, of the of being cooked, and that's the second stage. So I'm reviewing it like sort of like a potter continuing to meld that and knead that idea. But if I'm just going to review it again. So the visual of the water is the desire to be, the tohu vavohu, the chaotic void and the pure potential, but it desires to be. The rock is the being, which is the definition, is the purpose of meaning, and it's brought about by the light being illuminated, right? That's why we have the metaphors in this and talking about Torah as being the light, like shining, illuminating. Things are clear, they're becoming clear, they're becoming fired, and they harden like clay, like pottery. And then the last stage is the love, which is the spirit, which is in the act of love, which is letting go, which is like the climax. And it's the joy, and it's the prayer, and it's the song, right? Particularly that song, like the cooing of doves once they find a place to sit. So I hear the dogs a lot. There's nothing I can do about them. I'm hoping that my microphone just gets rid of half the dogs. No, it doesn't get rid of half the dogs, but in the recording, somehow it doesn't come out. Part of what happens on the rock is the receiving of your mitzvah and your Torah, right? So if you have, and we can describe that same metaphor and the same process, which is the natural cycle happening through the year. So Pesach is the beginning holiday of the dry season. And if the world sits on the calendar, sits like if we looked at it like a diorama of the world, from Pesach to Sukkot, which is the 6 months of the dry season, that's like the world emerging. And the world descending back into the chaotic void is the 6 months of the bottom part of the year, which is the rainy season. And right now, in the recording of this video, we're just at the cusp of breaking out of the potential womb of the rainy season and bursting out into the month of Nisan, which is the birth of the year. That birth of the year that happens in the month of Nisan is the time of Earth, is the time of the rock. The next, so if you have the 12 months, you divide them into 4 tekufot, 4 periods, and each period has its own thing. This is the time of the rock. And then from Shavuot on is the time of fire, and then water, and then air, and it goes around. So right now we're birthing out the year into spring, and it's like we're going up the mountain to the top of the rock. At the top of the rock, where things are the most hard, right? So if you climb a mountain, you'll see everything's more mushy by the bottom of the sea. And as you get into higher elevations, things are getting harder and harder, and you're still having some trees. But once you get all the way to the top, all of a sudden, for many mountains, all of a sudden the tree line goes away, and just things are getting rockier and rockier, until you're just in this ultimate hard definition. And that's why the Torah is given in this place of definition, giving laws and giving definitions. It understands that life is not at this high place. and that as you descend back into life, it gets a lot more messier, and it's not easy, right? But the place of definition is at that height, and that height is at the 3 months that go into Shavuot. That's like the height of the mountain, and then when you go down the mountain, you're going back to Sukkot, which is like the joy and the finishing of it. At the giving of the Torah, where you get the Torah and mitzvah, you see that the Creator is understood as giving meaning to each one of us, the Torah and the mitzvah. In fact, when it describes the giving of the Torah, of course, it says, and I'm the Creator of the world, and I took you out of Egypt. Of course, those are the two things the Creator has to do. Mr. Splitter is just to like know where this is coming from, the one that splits the duality. And it says it in a singular. Here's the Torah and mitzvah, not mitzvah. Mitzvah. Here's the mitzvah. That mitzvah is like, and what is your command? What is your mitzvah? And in a sense, knowing who you are and what you need to do is the most important of all the mitzvahs, right? The 613, like general amorphous things, like, oh, this is an ideal human being. Okay, great. But what is your mitzvah? What is it? Who are you, and what do you need to do here? When you get that, nothing else matters. And in fact, that is a rock and a refuge in the sea of unknowns, right? So as you struggle to find out who you are and what your purpose is and what you need to do, that is the hardest thing, right? It's even harder than doing the thing, because knowing what to do and knowing who you are is the thing that gives you definition. Once you know who you are, okay, so if you get splashed by some waves, it's okay. If you go through some hardship, it's okay, because that's the purpose, that's why you're here. But if you have no reason and you have no definition, you're in like this amorphous state, and it's understood that the Creator will give that to you. When you receive that, it's like you're sitting on your own personal Har Sinai, and it's described many times, just like that, your own personal Har Sinai. So, of it says that in the time of the giving of the Torah, that Moshe spoke and the Creator translated. It was a response. Actually, just even if you look at the literal words, as it says, Moshe spoke and the Creator responded. So where is that response? That response is Moshe was speaking, but what does it really mean to everyone? How each and every single being that stood at that mountain in the story of Har Sinai understood the words that Moshe was saying. That was the Creator translating, i.e., giving the Torah and mitzvah to each individual creation. So the way in which we take it, even less that we need to not trust the way in which we take things, we need to actually trust it more. Like if that's the way that it hit me, I need to take that seriously. If I heard it if it hit me that way, and that is like the idea of like a Torah's Chaim, a living Torah, which is that I respond to my own visionary quest to know, right? And that quest turns into a prayer, and that prayer turns into wisdom and guidance that I can get in a very, very particular way, and that I trust that definition is coming from the one who gives definition. And then I embrace the fall back into, I can't, what can I do with it? I can only do my very best. So now I want to go through some of the quotes where we'll see different aspects of Torah on rocks. So I'm gonna jump past the rest of the source sheet, and that's just basically talking about things that we talked about, which is the each one of the splits of creation, and then I'm gonna go to. Are there any questions actually? If you want to write anything into the chat. So if you look at the source sheet on number 17, it's in Yoma. So it says, and the rabbis say that the world was created from Tzion, as it is stated, the Psalm of Asaph, and Hashem, God has spoken and called the earth from the rising of the sun to its place of setting. Otzion, the perfection of beauty. God has shined forth, like there's that metaphor of the shining. And this is called the Even Ashtia, which is this idea that there's a foundation rock. I'm going to read, I'm going to hold on to that thought, and I'm going to read what Scott says. I think I'm going to say. Yes, so the rock is the refuge, and it is a place to hold on to for the love, right? And to find definition, and it's like a refuge for life, but you also have to let go of it. Exactly. So in the chat, I want to get a feel. Who wants to look into the Even Ashtia for the rock? We can, in a different session, we can also look at other things, but who wants to look at that? Or we can go to Jacob's pillar. Okay, maybe we're gonna take the time to do Even Ashtia in the next session, and we'll in another session, and I'm gonna jump to Jacob's pillar, which is source number 24. So Yaakov left Beersheba and he set out for Haran, and he came upon a certain place, and he stood there for the night, and for the sun had set. Taking the stones of that place, he put them under his head, and he lay down in that place. So this is a description of Jacob, who is called Israel. And that's where the Jewish people get their, which are the tribe of Judah, they get their name Israel from this ancestor of ours, Israel. And this is also one of the places where he gets named. He gets his name. And this is his sort of most primal experience with his God and the Creator is here at this moment, where he's transitioning from one stage of his life to another. He left Beersheba and set out for Haran, and he came upon this place, and he took the stones of that place, and he put it under his head and lay down in that place. So if you look in the Hebrew, it says, Vayetze Yaakov me Beersheba v'yelech Harana b'makom, V'yelen sham kivo shemesh v'yikach ma'avnei hamakom v'yashem v'sharze v'yashkev b'makom. So the fact that it keeps saying the place, the place, the place, the place, the place, this place is like, this is the place, right? So we arrived at the place, says the Baal Turim. The word place is used 3 times in this verse, which hints at the 3 pilgrimages of holy days, which his children would come to that place in the future. But also, the Creator is called the place, right? The place in which all of this can happen. In that sense, we're like an etching on the rock of the Creator. If the Creator is that ultimate source, even pre the desire to be, but the thing that is desiring to be, that pure and simple, complete and utter, unknowable and undescribable thing behind all the layers, we're like the little things that are etched on it. And so in that sense, it's the makom, the place. So it's in the Midrash, it talks about that moment where Yaakov put down these, like in a circle, he put down these rocks to be kind of like a pillow, like some sort of uneven rock pillow. And during the night, each one of the rocks were fighting who wanted to be directly under his head to be the rock pillow for Jacob. And they were fighting during that night. And then in the morning, they merged together into one big rock. They, through their struggle to all be the rock that is under his head, they merged into one. So the Midrash also goes on to describe the Midrash goes on to describe his anxiety. So it says, he thought in his heart, if anyone is not familiar with the story, especially if they're watching this in the non-live version, you can go look up the story of Jacob and Haran. And if anyone has particular questions right now, they should ask. So he thought in his heart, this is his anxiety. My grandfather Avram fathered a righteous son and a wicked son from two women. Isaac, Yitzchak, was righteous, and Ishmael was wicked. And then my father, Yitzchak, had fathered a righteous son and a wicked son from one woman. And this is Jacob's anxiety, which is kind of comical. And the Midrash is coming. This is like a 2,000-year-old Midrash. He says, but me, I ended up with 4 wives. So how many wicked sons are going to come out of me? He was just like, he just couldn't believe it. Like, if this is a duality and you always have like the good and the bad, my gosh, I married 4 different women. I've had tons. This is like going to be, I'm unloading a whole bunch of bad people in the world. That's what his anxiety. So then the Holy One said to him, God forbid, which is also comical. The whole God is saying that. God forbid, as it says in Shir Shirim, the Holy of Holies, you are beautiful all over, my beloved. There's no blemish in you at all, right? So the Creator's saying, like, why are you looking at it like this? Like, oh, good and bad people, right? I love you so much. There's nothing wrong with you. I know you just the way you were. I'm the one that created you. I'm not, there's no, why are you looking at it that way? Yeah, sure. Some of your children are going to be challenging for you and some of them are not. But why are you doing this duality thing? I'm the one who splits it, you know? I love it. Like, I'm in love with you. I love your good side. I love your bad side. I just love you. That's what the Creator's saying in the Midrash. So then it says, he had a dream in a stairway and was set from the ground. And this is the description of this Shekhinah and the presence of God hovering over the rock, right? The ladder that goes from the rock to the cloud. So he had a dream and a stairway was set in the ground and its top reached the sky. And by the way, just to make sure we're grounded, is that this is the rock we're talking about. It's in Jewish tradition that Beit El, this place where Yaakov is encountering, is the rock. And in Israel, you have the place called the Dome of the Rock. And this rock is the rock, the Even Ashtiyah, which maybe we'll talk about later in this session or another thing, which is called the rock, right? It's the mother rock of which it's that place where initially the Creator was whispering on and blew the water away and formed it hard. It's that it ended up that it's not on the top of the mountain. It's just on some side place. It's just tossed over here. But this was actually the mother rock. It is the rock, i.e., the place, the ground, the rock. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear of this place that we're talking, which is why he has this vision here. And Hashem was standing beside him, and he said, I am Hashem, the God of your father, Abraham, the God of Isaac, the ground on which you are lying. I will give to you and your offspring and to your descendants shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, which is this idea of from this place, from this rock, the dust that spreads out and the birthing of everything. So the families of earth shall bless themselves by you and your descendants. And remember, I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. And I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. Right? It's this very loving description of, once again, the Creator as the refuge during the turmoil of life, and the one that splits the dualities, and the one that creates everything through making this sort of refuge and rock. So Jacob woke up from his sleep and I'm on source 29, woke up from his sleep and he said, surely Hashem is present in this place and I didn't know it, right? Actually, this is this is a cornerstone of biblical spirituality, and therefore also Jewish spirituality, is divine encounters with perfectly ordinary things that you don't realize was an encounter with divine until after. It's almost like every single time. So you think you're talking to a regular person, you think life is just a normal situation of a bunch of schlubs and schnooks talking to each other, messing around, and all of a sudden you think, what was that, right? Oh my gosh, this is not, I was treating everything as mundane, I was treating everything as unholy, and now I realize the Creator is here. So, in fact, further down in the source sheet, you'll find that Shneur Zalman of Liadi says that that is what it means to be in the Holy of Holies, to be on the rock, to be in the Beit HaMikdash, to be in Jerusalem. It means to be in complete awe. And any place where you are on the ground and you realize, oh, I thought this was just a bunch of rocks, but now I know it's holy. You are now in Jerusalem, you're in the Holy of Holies, and you're standing before the Creator. That's really what's going on. And that's not like a joke or a metaphor, but that's actually what the stage is. It happened there, and it happens wherever you call upon Hashem's name. So Yaakov says, oh my, Hashem was here, and I didn't even know it. He was totally shaken, and he said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the abode of the Creator, and that is the gateway to heaven, right? The realization that the Creator is dwelling, right? Like two little doves on this rock, and that this entire manifestation and hardening of life and all of the turmoil in it is actually just this interaction of love between the Creator. That's the gateway. That's the door into this place. And that's actually what it says about prophecy, is that you have to be in a state of joy, right? Even the prophecies of like Eicha that were very, very sad, they only came down to people while they were in a state of joy. So prophecy is you start to play music, you get yourself all worked up into this state of tremendous joy and love, and then you hear what the Creator is saying. You can't actually hear it until you get into the Kodesh Kodashim, until you get into the Holy of Holies. You still think the world's like a big battle, you're not going to be able to hear what the Creator is saying. You still think it's like a set table and everyone's eating and it's a nice little place. Once only you could hear the words when you're in the most intimate place, where you're like, oh, this is a love affair between the known and the unknown. What are you saying? Now I can hear you. So that's like the gateway or the stairway into Shemayim, into heaven. So early in the morning, Yaakov took the stone that he had put under his head and he set up a pillar and he poured oil on top of it, right? So this idea that this is where I received my mitzvah, this is where I sat on the mountain, this is where I got my definition, this is where I got my purpose, that's like the idea of the rock, right? Having a rock and having a purpose is and a personal one is that moment. So when he rose in the morning, he found all the stones. This is the source 30. He found all the stones were one stone, and he was glad that his bed was whole. And the Holy One said to him, by your life, just as these stones have become one, so shall all your sons be righteous, right? So he's giving him a new way of looking at it. Now, all the sons are fighting. In fact, some of his sons actually try to kill each other, right? They're definitely doing immoral things in the story. So you know that already. So as you're reading the Torah, you already know that his sons do immoral things. Plus, they actually go to the point of trying to kill each other. So when Hashem is saying all your sons are righteous, he's not saying on the surface. He's saying, I'm the one that split things. I'm the one that made these things that you're defining as issues, and as they work themselves out, you can see what I'm saying. So he says, for you shall have a covenant with the stones of the field. And the beasts of the field shall be at peace with you. So I'm just going to take the stages. Once the fighting stops between the human siblings, like once the fighting is That's not the thing to be fighting all the time. And once you're realize that that all of us are in a circle and we are all tzaddikim, i.e. we're all righteous, we're all brought here specifically for our own purpose. Once you do that, then you can achieve this thing called the covenant with the stones of the field, i.e. you're in a bris, like a covenant with the earth itself and with the rocks. Like the Arizal says that everything in existence has a soul, including rocks. Not, of course, not just people, of course, not just animals. Also, trees have a soul and rocks have a soul. So when you make a covenant with the rocks, then the beasts of the field shall be at peace with you because they have their covenant with the rocks. And then, and that's like the preferred state. So at that point, okay, so what is the meaning of oil in this context, and what does it mean that he poured oil on the rock? So oil, wine, water is, oh boy. So water is understood as wisdom, which is the general Torah, right? Wisdom, i.e. that it comes from the top and it rolls down to the bottom. It has a very high abstract meaning, but it translates down to the practical and it remains pure as it goes down. That's wisdom. Wine is, and there's blood and milk, we're not, okay, but those are different fluids, but wine is referred to as Kabbalah. So that's like mysticism, because in the sense, mysticism answers why some people do things that we just don't understand why in the world they would do them. And because there's mystical reasons, and because when someone is in a mystical state, it's like they're drunk, right? It's like a higher, it's this high state, i.e. literally high, because it's like an entheogen, being closer to God in that, in sort of like, drinking wine. And like it says in Torah, in come the wine, out come the secrets, right? But there's a deeper wisdom, even deeper than just Kabbalah, which is like the mystical hidden meaning of things. There's the thing that incorporates the mystic, incorporates the simple meaning, incorporates the allegorical, incorporates the metaphor, incorporates all of that stuff. But what is the essence of the whole thing? Essence of the message, not leaving out the simple meaning, not leaving out the allegories, not leaving out the metaphors, not leaving out the mysticism, taking them all into account. What's the message in essence for me? That is called the oil. That oil is like on the level of Yechida of the soul, like the essence and the point of the soul, like the deep inner thing. And that only comes out through crushing, right? So oil is olive oil. And you only get that when you're crushed, right? When you're just like drunk and enjoying it, you don't get the essence. That's beautiful. And when you're getting the simple meaning, you're just getting hydrated. But oil has these two, in Kabbalah, has these two beautiful properties. One is when you have an essential oil of something, like the essential oil of a rose, right? Let's say, I don't know. So when you get the essential oil of a rose, it's every single thing the rose is, right? It's the essence of the rose. And it has nothing to do with a rose. It has none of the particulars of rose. It's actually not a rose in any way whatsoever. The whole rose is all gone. Just the essence of the rose is there. And that's like, okay, I'm listening to the simple meaning of life. I'm reading it on a deeper level. I'm reading it on a more mystical. I'm reading it on all levels. But let's say I let go of everything. I let go of the most material experience that I'm experiencing. I'm let go of the details of the most mystical experience I'm having. I'm letting go of the details of the emotional thing. But what's essence that's running through all of this? There you have the oil. And that only comes through like a crushing, like olive is you get crush. You get rid of everything and you let go of everything, and then you get the oil. The fluid of oil only comes at the total decay of the year, right? So while wine comes in, if you get at the top of the mountain, the most definition, the rock, and then you're going back into the sea, back into the rain, back into the desire to be, and no longer the definition, but accepting the return back to your source. Wine comes in right before the rainy season. and the olive, the oil is going all the way down. It only comes to us at the very, very bottom of the year, at the very, very most decayed moment when everything, you have to let go of everything. The total and absolute crush, right? It's that when you get the essence, the total letting go of everything and the total crushing. And that's where you get the like the essential teaching. So that's why a king, right, or a prophet, or you get the oil poured on them, right? It's like the essence of the thing, i.e., like the deepest extraction. And when you return the oil um, uh, to the rock, it's like you're pouring the most essential thing. It now is saturating into the most material existence, the hardest vessel. If you think of the rock as the clay that gets hardened, like the hardened clay, now you're pouring the most essential of this whole thing into that most material vessel of the world. And whether someone gets, Mashiach means the anointed one, right? Which is in English, messianic moment is the anointing, right? Where the oil gets poured upon the most manifest, the most physical, the most mundane aspect of the world. And now you can experience the deepest essential experience through the most physical thing possible. It's not like the heights of experience. It's the most mundane and physical things happening, and you're experiencing it like it's the deepest, most wonderful thing. That's like the Mashiach moment. So anyways, he pours it on there, and he named the site the Beth El, the house of the Creator, but it used to be called Luz. Yaakov then made a vow. He says, if you remain with me, if he protects me on this journey that I am making and gives me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and if I return safe to my father's house, Hashem shall be my God, and this stone which I have set upon up as a pillar shall be the house of the Creator, and all that you give me I will set aside as a tithe for you, right? So that's the idea of first fruits. Shavuot, which is the top of this mountain, which is the top of the rock, which is the top of the definition, this he's referring to giving the, I mean, in a most general sense, is source 31. In a most general sense, he's giving the first fruits back to the Creator. So he's making a promise on the top of the rock to return the fruits of his first fruits, i.e. his manifestation, his definition, what he has to give to the world, to return that to the Creator at this moment in time, which is Shavuot, which is the top of the rock, which is the place where in the Jewish system, that's where the first fruits are given, because that's when the first fruits show up. That's the reason. So this idea of the house of the Creator being on the rock is the same visual of what is going on top of this rock that is being emerging from the sea. It's the place where we get to have a relationship with the source of our being. That's what happens here. And it's like the house of the Creator. So like all of this minuscule and annoying and frustrating details, or sometimes even frightening details of this life, what are they? They're me. I can't experience the unknown, but I can encounter it through the known. So it's like looking at all of those details, but now they're shining and they're saturated and illuminated with that relationship. And that's like the idea of like a place where these two doves get to have a home. In the next version of these classes, we'll go into a different, we won't be doing, there'll be a part 2, which will talk about the rest of the rock references. But I want to at least be able to finish up this Yaakov pillar moment. So it's actually there where he makes this covenant. It's on that rock. And it's on his realization that the ground upon which he walks is holy, and that this rock is the house of the Creator, and we're in it, like we're in that relationship. I'm going to jump to 37, source 37, and hopefully we'll finish with that. So it says that, in fact, we're not going to. I'm going to jump to source 41, and we'll get to 37 later. So it's a quote from the Tehillim, from the Psalms, and it says that the Even Masu Habonim Haisa L'Rosh Pina, that the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. And we find throughout the entire Torah, over and over and over again, and if we talked about all of these stories, coming back to a meta story, the meta story is that if we take that visual, that the Creator will create a refuge for you amidst the storm, and will give you definition to know what your contribution to this world needs to be. And each one of us is not the center of creation. We each have our flaw, and some other aspect of creation makes up for us. But we just need to do what we need to do here. And to know that creates that refuge for yourself. And also, in a general sense, the fact that anything is happening in this absurd situation where it seems wild that anything should be happening at all. But the fact that something is happening is because a refuge was created. The most minute details were created to be able to make this experience happen. That sense is that it doesn't matter how big, and it doesn't matter how powerful you are. If you are who you are and you do the thing that you need to do, then you will find refuge, and you will be able to do that. You will be able to do that path. And that will be more than enough. And in fact, it will become that the stone that the builders rejected becomes the cornerstone. And you see that story over and over and over again. So Yaakov, the one that is the rejected one, was the one that struggles to above. Judah, who has no reason to end up to become the leader, he ends up to become the leader. David, who's the worst of all the sons, he then becomes the king. Rachel, who is, each one of these stories is on and on and on and on. The story of Hannah, and the story of Sarah, and the story of Leah, and the story, it's one story after another of don't take the details of the storm, don't look at the statistics of the issue. You have to just find what you are and try, and you will find that this refuge is created, and it'll end up that even though it looked like it was a rejection, it was actually an ascent. And there you have the moment in the Torah, which is kind of like the most defining moment of the Torah, because the stones are the most overlooked of everything, right? Oh, fire, oh, water, oh, the spirit of air blowing through, spirituality, right? But the rock, it's just like, I go on a walk with my sons, and they're like, and well, especially one of them is telling me, like, rocks are treasures. Look at this, look at this, look at that. And everyone's just stomping on them, really, like, just totally ignoring rocks as if they're like, but they're the bedrock and refuge of everything. Everything is sitting on them, but they're the most ignored, right? That's like the idea that the stone is constantly ignored and rejected, but that rejection of being the smallest and being the least, like that is the idea that the Jewish people look at themselves at the smallest and the least of everyone, that is actually the greatest advantage, being the thing that gets trodden on and dusty in the dirt. That is actually the greatest thing. The smallest, most ignored and unseen thing will be the thing that rises up. And in source 42, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it would be amazing to read it yourself, because it's such a beautiful story, is the story of David, which is the culmination of this kind of like power versus God doing something for the Creator. And basically this little David shows up, and he has a little tiny rock. right? And the most powerful person in the entire enemy and army, it has this massive giant sword, and he's putting people to a test to who could fight him, but he's a giant. And David says, no, I'm not going to take any sword, and he doesn't need anything. He said, uh, um, he says, do you see that man coming out? He comes to defy Israel. The man who kills him will be rewarded by the king. David says, what will be done with the man, right? Um, all right, you could read it. But basically, he takes this little tiny rock, which is the most ignored thing and least powerful thing on this entire battlefield, and he takes down the largest power with a little tiny rock, and it's the end of the story. So that is, it represents David in its things, like ignored, everyone thinks is small, pushed away, but if it knows exactly where it needs to be and it sets out with a purpose and it knows itself and it hits the right spot, then it takes down everything. You have that same story being told over and over again, like in The Hobbit and different places. But this is the story of David and the story of the rock. So I wanted to give everybody a blessing, and we will hopefully be able to do a second visit to the Holy Rocks, which there's a lot there. But I want to give us a blessing that during this time of this live moment that we have together is definitely a time of turmoil, and definitely a time of waves of change and movement and seeming flood. And if we look for who we are and we know what we need to contribute in this moment, we can't solve everything for sure, but we can do the thing that we were brought here to do. We can dissolve, if that's our stage right now, and return and give to others and act with kindness and let go, or we can take decisive action and do something that we need to do. But those, I give us a blessing that we should know that we have a refuge, and that despite the fact that sometimes things look statistical, that I give us a blessing that we should know our mitzvah, that we should know what we need to do in life. We should know who we are. We should receive that Torah, and we should be able to bring it down the mountain, which is the wisdom of the rock.